I was reborn. Back to the exact day I adopted that ungrateful child, Jiang Te. The wind howled, and a newborn's cries pierced the air. Then I remembered, today was the day my dear husband left his illegitimate child on the roadside I passed after work. He knew I wouldn't have the heart to abandon a baby. As long as I brought the child home, he could naturally suggest adoption, making the boy legally ours. In my past life, he succeeded. But this time, without hesitation, I turned and walked away. When I later heard the child had developed severe pneumonia from the cold, high fevers, potential future disability, I laughed through tears. What I didn't expect was that Jiang Te, that same child, had also been reborn into his own body and was about to experience the life he should have lived. In my previous life, I raised him as my own. I poured my heart and soul into him, gave up my career, became a full-time homemaker, used my parents' inheritance to buy him a house, and even arranged his marriage in the city. And my reward? I froze to death alone in a leaky house in the countryside. Before dying, I licked filthy water off the ground to quench my thirst. Meanwhile, my dutiful son lived comfortably in the house I bought, doting on his real mother, my husband's mistress. That day, I died in silent fury. So cold. So thirsty. It was right before Jiang Te's wedding. Of course, getting married meant buying a house and a car. He insisted on settling in a big city. Housing prices were sky high. He had always been spoiled, and his fiancée was picky. They chose a luxury duplex in the city center, no mortgage, full payment, 8 figures. Standing awkwardly before me, eyes pleading, he said softly, "Mom, how could I hold my head up if I had to take a loan in front of Lele? Besides, we have the money. I'm your only son, you wouldn't let me be humiliated, right?" He was always prideful. I didn't tell him that it wasn't our money. It was the inheritance my parents had left me, solely for me. They had written a will, making it clear it had nothing to do with my husband. Because of that, Jiang Nian, my husband, had resented me for years. He said my parents didn't trust him. Things only improved between us after we adopted Jiang Te. But even then, Jiang Nian never brought money home. He kept all his wages to himself. If I ever asked, he would explode in anger. All household expenses, living costs, tuition, tutoring, came from me. I never complained. Because they were the people I loved. The family I chose. Eventually, I sold my parents' old villa and my favorite jewelry. I voluntarily transferred the funds to Jiang Te so he could buy the house of his dreams. But buying the house was only the beginning. Renovation cost another fortune. Faced with his tearful gaze, I gritted my teeth and, for the first time in my life, humbled myself to borrow money from relatives. "You haven't worked in years," a long-lost friend scoffed. "Even if someone lends it to you, how will you repay it?" Flushed with shame, I stammered, "Jiang Nian said he'd help, and Jiang Te is getting married. I'll look for a job again." She was skeptical, but in the end, she lent me the money. I brought it to Jiang Te's new place, only to see a strange woman inside. Lele, usually cold toward me, was chatting happily with her, calling her mom. Mom. But I'd already met her real mother-in-law. This wasn't her. Doubt rose in me. The woman smiled warmly, patting Lele's hand. "Good, good, you're like my own daughter. If Jiang Te ever bullies you, I'll set him straight." Then Jiang Te emerged, saying with a softness I'd never heard, "Mom, who's really your son?" My blood turned cold. This woman looked just like him. That day, I lost all composure and screamed in disbelief. My husband rushed over, shielding that woman behind him, glaring at me with disdain. Even Jiang Te, my beloved child, stood with her, holding her hand. In the scuffle, someone shoved me. I fell down the stairs. Blood gushed. My skull fractured. My leg broke. Neither of them called an ambulance. Jiang Nian didn't even look at me. He rushed to grab my phone, unlocked it with Jiang Te's birthday, and turned to him gleefully. Wang Qing actually got the money. I'll chip in some more, and you two can renovate properly. Jiang Te hesitated, glanced at me, and said. But, she. He didn't even want to call me mom. Jiang Nian turned back, kicked me hard, and said coldly. I was going to tell Wang Qing anyway, your mother and I are the real couple. This family should have reunited long ago. As for her, now that she's like this, just send her back to the countryside. No one there knows her. And she can't move. The world blurred. My always gentle husband said these things without blinking. In disbelief, I looked up. That woman only had to softly say Jiang Te, and he nodded. Dad, whatever you decide. He turned away. Didn't look back. And so, they dumped me in Jiang Nian's rural hometown. A place I visited once after marriage and never again, too remote, too cold, too terrifying. Now, crippled and abandoned in a rotting wooden shack, I shivered in silence. No one came. The wind cut like knives. But what broke me wasn't the cold. It was what Lele told me, laughing, the truth. Jiang Te was the biological son of Jiang Nian and that woman. The adoption was all a setup. To make me treat him like my own. And Jiang Te. He had always known who his real mother was. I lay on the ground, sobbing, screaming, cursing like a madwoman. Jiang Nian looked at me with nothing but disgust. Jiang Te frowned and walked away. But the look in that woman's eyes, I would never forget it. She looked down at me with condescending pity. As if I were a pitiful bug. I broke completely. I truly thought I would freeze to death in that dilapidated shack. But when I opened my eyes, I was wearing a warm, clean coat. My limbs were agile. My hands pale and clean. Passers-by glanced at me with curious stares. Dazed, I walked for quite a while before it hit me. I'd been reborn. What day was it? Frantically, I pulled out my phone. I scraped my nail opening the zipper, but I didn't care. All my attention was on the glowing screen. December 29th, 2002. I stared at the numbers. Then I laughed and cried. If this road hadn't been so empty, anyone who saw me, laughing and crying like that, would have thought I'd lost my mind. Today was the day I picked up Jiang Te from the street. December 29th. I'd always treated this day as his birthday. I racked my brain for 24 years planning his birthday parties. Suddenly, I heard it, a baby's wailing cry, sharp and heartbreaking. My body moved on instinct, walking toward the sound. But after a few steps, I stopped and looked around. Yes. This was the place. Right near the old villa my parents left me. No houses nearby. Just an empty lot, a shortcut I used to take home, and once, my secret childhood hideout. I'd always thought it was fate that I found Jiang Te here. But the truth. My oh-so-loving husband, Jiang Nian, had planted him here deliberately, so I'd adopt him willingly and make it all seem natural. So, it had already begun. Fate had been kind enough to send me back, to the turning point of it all. This time, the baby's cries stirred nothing in me. In fact, knowing it was Jiang Te crying in the cold wind, I felt satisfied. Pleased. In the past, I had loved him dearly. When he was sick, I stayed up all night to care for him. When he had school, I walked him there and back in rain or shine. Once, the weather suddenly turned cold, I gave him my coat and caught a fever myself. Still, I dragged myself up to walk him home, afraid he'd be unsafe. How laughable. I looked around. There was no one, just a crying infant on the ground. Of course. Jiang Nian was always meticulous. He fooled me for over 20 years, how could he leave behind anything suspicious? He must have known my personality inside out to come up with such a cruel plan. To abandon a child in this kind of freezing weather and bet on me to bring him home. Hey! I sneered. I didn't spare the baby another glance and walked away in the opposite direction. You were so certain I'd fall for it. Then let's see, in this life, without my involvement, how will Jiang Nian manage to bring his illegitimate child home? When Jiang Nian called me, I was at a shopping mall, trying on a beautiful, expensive dress. Back then, I'd believed his lies about saving money for the family. He didn't bat an eye buying expensive cigarettes. But me. I'd avoided my favorite shops for years. After adopting Jiang Te, I barely spent anything on myself, new clothes maybe once a year. Everything went toward raising him. And what did I get in return? A snake I raised with my own hands. The phone kept ringing. I stared at the screen for a long time, then answered with a blank face. On the other end, Jiang Nian tried to mask his anxiety. Ching, your boss said you left work a while ago. Why aren't you home yet? His probing tone made me smirk. A thought occurred, one of revenge. So I forced down my hatred and spoke gently, even sounding worried. Me. I'm at the hospital. I'll be home late. Don't wait for me to eat, okay? Oh, doctor's calling me. My phone's dying. Let's talk later. Bye. I hung up, then immediately powered off the phone. I could already imagine Jiang Nian's thoughts. He probably believed I'd picked up the child and taken it to the hospital. And I knew him well enough now to bet. He wouldn't return to the scene. He wouldn't risk exposing himself. What if I'd called the police? What if the police traced the abandoned child? If he were caught nearby, how could he explain himself? But on the flip side, as long as I didn't bring the child home, he wouldn't be at ease. It was the dead of winter. He'd sit at home anxiously, waiting for me to come back with the baby, only to find me returning empty-handed. How would he feel? Just thinking about it filled me with twisted satisfaction. I wandered the mall until 8 p.m., bought a few bags of clothes, then found a nearby clinic and had my scratched nail bandaged, even though it barely bled. Then I hailed a cab. It was nearly 9 p.m. when I returned to the familiar apartment. From a distance, I saw Jiang Nian pacing nervously beneath the building. When he spotted me, he rushed over, face full of worry. In the past, I might have been moved by that look. Now, I noticed something else. His eyes went straight to my hands. How unfortunate. I wasn't carrying a baby. Just shopping bags. Ching, didn't you say you were at the hospital? What's all this? Under the dim light, his voice cracked as he stumbled over his words. It was then I realized how clumsy his acting really was. And how blind and foolish I'd once been. Me. I bought some clothes. It's almost New Year, right? I'll show you later, see if they look good. In my past life, I once lay dying in that broken-down house and dreamed. If I ever got another chance, I would grab a knife and drag both father and son to hell with me. But now, standing here, hatred burning in my chest, I felt calm. Oddly normal. I even chatted casually with him all the way home. Only when we got inside, when he finally couldn't hold it in. Did I speak slowly? Oh, the hospital. Right. I scratched my nail when pulling out my phone. Look, the doctor said I should wrap it up for 3 days. Risk of infection. I raised my hand, cradling the bandage tenderly. Truth was, it was barely a scratch. Didn't even bleed. The doctor had stared at me like I was insane when I insisted on wrapping it. But so what? From now on, even a tiny scrape on me is more precious than any one of them. Jiang Nian's face turned pale. When did you go to the hospital? I smiled, innocent as ever. Right after I passed Wanda Mall. You messaged me, remember? I rushed to grab my phone and scratched myself. So I turned around and went to the clinic. Why? What's wrong? I wasn't lying. He had messaged me, telling me to come home quickly. He wanted me to bring Jiang Te back. But now, that message had become the perfect alibi. Ha! How interesting. Jiang Yan's face had gone beyond pale. The spot where he left Jiang Te wasn't far from Wanda Mall. In his mind, just a little more, and his plan would have succeeded. But now, it had all fallen apart, because he urged me too soon. I watched his expression shift, panic rising, until he suddenly turned and rushed out the door. I smiled as I watched his back. That's right. If I didn't bring his son home, then that poor, defenseless child must have been lying out there in the cold all this time. A newborn, abandoned by his own father on a desolate road. How tragic. Ha! Ha! Snow had begun to fall outside the window. Now, the one waiting at home was me. But unlike Jiang Yan, who waited in dread, I waited in joy, with anticipation. I thought, this is only the beginning. In my past life, I never understood why some women would spend half a lifetime just to get revenge. Why tie yourself to the people who hurt you? Why not walk away and live well? Looking back, I can only laugh at how naive I was. Now that I've been reborn, with a bright future, a promising career, and a fortune my parents left me, why should I forgive? This hatred will never fade. It will turn me into a monster. So no, I won't divorce Jiang Yan. I won't make a clean break. I'll stay. With these eyes, I'll watch them. With these hands, I'll steer them. And I'll make sure they all live lives even more miserable than mine in my last life. After that night, Jiang Yan didn't come home for 3 days. I called, sounding worried. He mumbled something vague, said he was in the hospital. I could faintly hear a woman crying in the background. My hand clenched, then slowly loosened. I smiled. Was it her? That woman, of course she knew the plan. Now that it had failed, their child had ended up in the hospital because of him. Ha! Ha! Let her cry. They brought this on themselves. What did it have to do with me? On the 4th day, Jiang Yan called. He asked me to come to the hospital. His voice was hesitant. I played the part of the concerned wife and agreed without pressing further. At the hospital, he told me, his sister had picked up a baby who nearly froze to death after work. The police couldn't find the parents, so the hospital was holding on to the child for now. He kept going on about how pitiful the child was. A nurse nearby added with a frown. Yes, truly heartbreaking. What kind of parent abandons a newborn in this weather? If she'd arrived any later, the baby wouldn't have made it. Even now, well, its throat is damaged. Might never speak again. And the fever, 3 days straight. Even if it survives, it might be. Enough, Jiang Yan snapped. His face darkened, as though she'd struck a nerve. Realizing his outburst, he forced an apology, then turned to me. Qing. There's something I want to tell you. He said the child was too pitiful to leave behind, he wanted to adopt it. He said his recent fertility test showed he had severe oligospermia, he likely wouldn't be able to have children of his own. This child came at the perfect time, a gift from heaven. He said. I felt lightheaded. He'd said the same words in my past life, slightly different, but the meaning was the same. Because of his condition, I had never once suspected Jiang Te was his biological son. And because of it, I knew now, even if Jiang Te ended up disabled or mentally impaired, he'd never abandon him. That boy was likely the only child he could ever have. And more importantly, it was the child of the woman he truly loved. My lips twitched. My heart went cold. If he loved that child so much, why ruin my life to raise it? Then his sister appeared, Jiang Xuanhua, a woman who never showed up in my past life until much later. She chimed in gently. Sister-in-law, you and brother don't have children yet. You'll need someone in the future to care for you and handle the funeral rites. If he likes this child, why not just keep it? The sparkle in her eyes gave her away. In my past life, Jiang Xuanhua had always been unusually affectionate with Jiang Te. Now I saw the truth. She must have known everything from the start. It hit me all at once. I was the one who had helped her escape her backwater village, sent her to school, lent her money for her down payment, and helped her settle in the city. And in return, I got roped into their twisted little act, played like a fool. I'd worked like an ox, sacrificed everything, time, money, love, only to be discarded like garbage. Was I truly that stupid? My hands curled into fists. No, I said calmly. Their expressions shifted. They hadn't expected me, the kind and accommodating wife, to reject them outright. I frowned, pretending to be troubled. Even if we wanted to adopt, it can't be this child. Didn't you hear the nurse? The baby might be brain damaged. What's the point of raising a mute, possibly slow child? Don't blame me for being harsh, but come on, Jiang Nian, Xuanhua, I know you both have good hearts. Blame the parents who abandoned him, not yourselves. Bringing him to the hospital was already enough. Jiang Nian's face twisted. I hadn't even had time to relish the moment when... Crash. A porcelain cup rolled out from behind the curtain. A haggard-looking woman stepped out awkwardly, forcing a smile as she bent down to pick up the cup. It was her. The real mother of Jiang Te. Jiang Nian's true love. She wore ill-fitting old clothes, looked pale and worn down. Nothing like the elegant woman I'd met in my past life. I blinked, playing dumb. Who's she? Jiang Xuanhua glanced nervously at her brother and quickly said. Sister-in-law, she's my friend. We found the baby together. Friend. How amusing. I laughed. Then turned back around and spoke slowly, my voice full of feigned concern and disdain. In any case, I won't agree to adopting a mute, possibly brain-damaged child. If it were a healthy baby, maybe. I'd raise it as my own. But this one? No. At my words, the woman's hands clenched tight, veins bulging. I acted as if I hadn't noticed. Without giving Jiang Nian a chance to respond, I walked away. Didn't look at the baby again. In my past life, Jiang Te had been raised like royalty. Well-dressed, handsome, a top student in piano and calligraphy, admired by teachers and classmates alike, the perfect prince. But this Jiang Te would grow up mute. Perhaps mentally impaired. His life would be anything but smooth. Jiang Te. This life, your tragedy has nothing to do with me. Blame your parents. At that moment, I still didn't know. The newborn lying in that hospital bed, after being saved, had opened his eyes with a brief flicker of confusion and panic. Jiang Te of my past life had also been reborn. Not long after that day, under the pressure of my threat either give up the adoption or divorce, Jiang Nian eventually gave up on the idea of raising the child himself. Instead, it was Jiang Xuanhua who adopted the baby. Ironically, in this life, the child was still named Jiang Te, said to have taken her surname. I pretended not to know the truth. But on her daughter's birthday, I slid the silver bracelet I had originally bought for the little girl onto Jiang Te's wrist instead. Fei, he's younger than you. You should let him have it, okay? I said with a gentle smile. The little girl immediately screamed in protest, reaching out to snatch it back. Why? He's not my brother. He's a bastard. Daddy, kick him out. He's stealing my things. Fei. Jiang Xuanhua quickly scooped her up, her face flustered and scolding. Jiang Nian looked furious. Her husband, on the other hand, remained indifferent, saying a few vague words, clearly just humoring Jiang Nian. I laughed inwardly. I remembered how, in the past life, little Zhao Feifei had clung to Jiang Te like a fan to a superstar. She adored him. To her, he was the perfect older brother, charming, gentle, and her idol. But now, Jiang Te was nothing more than a burden, an unwanted child stealing her things. In the end, the matter was smoothed over with Jiang Nian personally offering to buy Feifei a new silver bracelet. I watched the discomfort on his face and smiled to myself. This is just the beginning. I confirmed that Jiang Te had been reborn when he was 4 years old. Unlike the last life, Jiang Xuanhua had now stayed home for nearly 4 years to care for 2 children. In my past life, by this time she had already climbed to a management position, always dressed elegantly, calmly rejecting her husband's request for a second child so she could devote all her love to Feifei. Now, she was worn out, bloated from pregnancy, for months along, waking early to shop, cook, serve her demanding husband, care for her increasingly moody daughter, and tend to a sickly, mute foster child. Jiang Nian clearly cared about his illegitimate son. But he showed little concern for his own sister. More than once, I'd overheard him arguing with her on the phone. You can't even teach your daughter right. Why is she always bullying Jiang Te? You're not working, what are you busy with? I give you 4,000 yuan a month, is that not enough? His tone was full of arrogance and disdain. I found it laughable. This was the same man who, in my past life, made me pay for Jiang Te's notebooks out of my own pocket. Now that he no longer had me as his cash cow, even spending a third of his 10,000 yuan salary must feel like bleeding him dry. There was no more guilt. No more gratitude for his sister raising his son. My private investigator told me Jiang Nian was trying to save money to buy a birthday gift for his boss's mother, trying to curry favor for a promotion. So, the woman, the one he once gave 6,000 yuan a month, now received just 4,000. Equal to Jiang Te. I did the math. By the boss's birthday banquet, Jiang Nian would have saved 40,000 to 50,000 yuan. For him, that was a small fortune. But only I knew. His boss's wife came from a powerful background. A gift like that meant nothing. In my past life, I had spent 200,000 yuan to help him win favor, and not long after, he was promoted to deputy director. This life will be different. I smirked. Then I saw it. Jiang Te, sneaking behind the kitchen door, quickly placing something on the floor before slipping away. His eyes, dark, hateful. Not at all like a child's. Jiang Xuanhua miscarried. It happened when Feifei ran into the kitchen and slipped, crashing into her mother, who was busy at the counter. Her belly hit the hard edge of the table. She let out a scream and collapsed in a pool of blood. Feifei, terrified, was slapped across the face by her father. Jiang Xuanhua was rushed to the hospital. Everyone went with her. Except me. I stayed at her house to look after the children. I went to the kitchen and checked the floor. Sure enough, in the pool of blood was a thin, nearly invisible layer of grease. It was Jiang Te. He had spread the oil. And let Feifei take the fall. I couldn't hold back my laughter. In the past, he had loved Feifei. He even secretly warned her not to be like me, a useless housewife, a parasite, good for nothing. His contempt had crushed me. I rose to my feet, walked toward Jiang Te's room, not avoiding Feifei's stare, and left the door open. Jiang Te looked surprised to see me. Then, a flicker of hope flashed in his eyes. What was he expecting? That I, just like before, would shower him with love and protection. But the next second, I understood. That was not the gaze of a child meeting a distant relative. My heart pounded. I was sure now. Jiang Te had also been reborn. I nearly burst into laughter. Thank you, heaven. My nails dug into my palm. I forced myself to stay calm. To finish the act. Jiang Te, has mommy and sister Feifei not treated you well? Because earlier, auntie saw you put something on the kitchen floor. And then Fei Fei slipped, just like that. There's still oil on the floor now. Tell Auntie the truth. Did you do something? Jiang Te's eyes flickered with panic. He couldn't speak. His arms flailed, trying desperately to explain. How laughable. In my past life, I raised him with such care. Yet I ended up raising a pitiful little bastard who couldn't even cover his tracks when setting up a petty scheme. Did he think no one would suspect a 4-year-old? Behind the door, Zhao Feifei, who had been eavesdropping, couldn't hold back anymore. She burst in, her face twisted in fury, and slapped Jiang Te so hard he fell backward. You bastard! Filthy mutt! You tried to hurt me! She screamed, completely convinced by what I'd said, unleashing her fear, her panic, all onto Jiang Te. Jiang Te was no match for Feifei, who was older and stronger. His eyes were full of hatred. And I understood where that hatred came from. As I suspected, even though Jiang Xuanhua knew Jiang Te was her blood nephew, his life had been far from easy. Her husband disliked the child from the start. Under his indulgence, Zhao Feifei not only stole every good thing Jiang Nian gave to Jiang Te, but constantly played cruel tricks on him, leaving him in dirty diapers all night while claiming she'd changed them, mixing flour into his formula, drawing a turtle on his face with ink. Because Jiang Te's throat was damaged and he couldn't cry out, it was only when his face turned red with discomfort that Jiang Xuanhua would finally notice. Then she'd call Jiang Nian in a panic, scolding her daughter. But that only made Feifei hate Jiang Te even more. The bullying escalated. In my past life, had Jiang Te ever been wronged like this? Those 4 years, reborn and trapped in this nightmare, made the entire Jiang Xuanhua household his enemy. The moment he grew older, more capable, he began his revenge. A splendid case of dogs biting dogs. I watched Jiang Te struggle on the floor a while longer, then lazily reached out and half-heartedly intervened. The look in his eyes, a twisted mix of gratitude and sorrow, disgusted me. But I smiled and sighed. No need to rush. This is only the beginning. Jiang Xuanhua lost the baby. A boy, they said. Zhao Feifei did end up revealing that it was Jiang Te who had tried to hurt her. But of course, she had no proof, too much time had passed, and grease on the kitchen floor was hardly suspicious. Jiang Nian, predictably, took his son's side. He berated Feifei for being cruel and malicious, ignoring the fact she was his own niece. His words of blame, the harshness in his voice. Zhao Feifei's eyes began to gleam with something close to madness. Jiang Te was blinded by Zhao Feifei. He was rushed to the hospital. When I heard the news, I calmly dialed a number. It's time. Soon after, a video arrived. In the footage, Tian Shui, Jiang Te's birth mother, held him in her arms, crying desperately. Jiang Nian quickly pulled them both into his embrace, comforting her like a husband would. Anyone watching the video, seeing their identical features, would have no doubt. They were a family. And that video. It was on its way to another man. Tian Shui's legal husband, a violent thug recently released from prison. The detective had uncovered everything. Tian Shui and Jiang Nian were childhood sweethearts from the same rural village. Jiang Nian later noticed my family's wealth and pursued me in college. Meanwhile, Tian Shui was married off to a brute by her parents. When her husband went to jail for assault, she moved to the city and took on odd jobs. Later, she and Jiang Nian met again. Their affair resumed in secret. Their love child was born, Jiang Te. With a little help from me behind the scenes, Tian Shui's husband finally found her. When he saw the video, he nearly grabbed a knife and stormed off. Tian Shui had to beg on her knees for him to stop. In the end, he demanded 500,000 yuan in hush money. 500,000 yuan. Even if you sold Jiang Nian, you wouldn't get that much. And so, the same man who froze me out for refusing to adopt Jiang Te, now came to beg me for help. Of course, his excuse was that he needed money to buy a gift for his superior. "If you don't trust me, I'll write you an IOU," he said, glancing nervously, clearly hoping I'd be generous enough to waive it. I laughed. Then tossed the video into his face. "Jiang Nian, I want a divorce." And not just that. I wanted every cent he'd spent on Jiang Te and Tian Shui all these years. Legally, my parents' inheritance belonged solely to me. Even the house we lived in. The salaries we earned during the marriage were joint assets, which meant I'd be entitled to half. My income had always been lower than his. Technically, I'd be getting compensation. Emotional damages, if you will. Right now, Jiang Nian must feel like a leaking house caught in a storm. On one side, Tian Shui's furious husband, violent and volatile. On another, Jiang Te's medical bills, which Jiang Xuanhua couldn't afford, and her husband refused to pay. And finally, me, handing him a divorce summons. The private detective had gathered countless photos of Jiang Nian's affairs over the years. And the very existence of Jiang Te, a living, breathing reminder, sealed the case. I didn't rush. As soon as the lawsuit was filed, I flew abroad. No one knew where. Even a cornered rabbit will bite. This time, I wouldn't be foolish. I'd keep myself far away, in case Jiang Nian grew desperate and tried something reckless. Like hiring someone to silence me. Or making a deal with Tian Shui's husband. Of course, I also made sure the detective spiced things up, adding a bit of fuel to the fire. Everything came to a head at the birthday banquet for Jiang Nian's boss's mother. With everything going wrong, Jiang Nian didn't notice the little gift the detective had slipped into the box, high-resolution photos of his boss's affair. According to the detective, the moment the box was opened, the boss's face turned dark. His wife slapped him in front of everyone. The whole party dissolved into chaos. A complete spectacle. Jiang Nian was swiftly fired. His boss swore he'd never work in the industry again. On the way home, things got worse. Tian Shui's husband found him. They fought. Jiang Nian made the mistake of mocking him, said he'd never win Tian Shui's heart. The man snapped. He cut Jiang Nian's genitals off. Then stomped on them. When the court date was finally announced, I returned, bodyguards by my side, in full glory. At his hospital bed, Jiang Nian begged me for mercy. He couldn't even sit up. "Please, for the sake of what we once had." I leaned close to his ear. "I heard your sister's giving up on your son," I whispered. "Well, of course, a mute and blind child is a burden for life." I smiled. "Jiang Nian, in the end, your own greed and cruelty did this. Even a newborn, you threw him on the street like trash. Tell me, when Jiang Te grows up, do you think he'll sue you for abandonment?" Jiang Nian's eyes widened. His face flushed. He finally understood. You knew all along." "Yes." I smiled so sweetly it nearly made him vomit blood. "But I didn't do a thing. You ruined your only son with your own hands. You're evil." A weak voice, Tian Shui. She'd heard it too. She looked more haggard than ever, like a walking skeleton, bruises on her face. I glanced at her, indifferent. "What's wrong? Wasn't it your plan? Didn't you both kill your own son together?" I clicked my tongue in mock pity. Then left, radiant, surrounded by bodyguards. 12 years later. I returned from a holiday in France, fully at peace. The same detective from years ago gave me an update. Tian Shui's husband had gone back to prison. Jiang Xuanhua returned Jiang Te to Jiang Nian. Now, Jiang Nian and Tian Shui lived in a dingy room in a slum, doing odd jobs to get by. All their money went into teaching Jiang Te Braille and sign language. But Jiang Te felt no gratitude. He knew exactly who to blame. In his past life, he had it all, and welcomed his biological parents without resentment. This life. He'd lost everything. So all his hatred turned toward Jiang Nian and Tian Shui. Violent and gloomy, he nearly failed to graduate from his special school. Only through countless bribes and loans did they manage to get him a certificate. Not that it helped. No company would hire a blind and mute man. Even a convenience store turned him away. He can wash dishes. Don't worry, he's very good at that. Tian Shui pleaded. I sat in a corner of the diner, watching the three of them bow and scrape before the manager. Jiang Te stood behind them, hair covering his eyes, shrouded in darkness. Fei, look at that guy. His eyes are scary. A familiar voice, Lulu, Jiang Te's wife in the past life. Zhao Fei, now grown, scoffed. Ugh. What's there to look at? He's blind. She turned to Lulu. You know what, he's AH. Time rewound. This time, the one lying in a pool of blood, was Lulu. Jiang Te had pulled a knife. He slashed again toward Fei, eyes crazed. He missed her arm. Others restrained him just in time. I watched as he struggled like a mad dog. While Jiang Nian and Tian Shui stood nearby, aged, broken, like hollow husks. At last. My heart was still. Peaceful. My new life had finally begun. The end.